The Waldorf Astoria Hotel, Park Avenue, Manhattan. May 22nd, 1956, 8:47 p.m. The grand ballroom was filled with New York's elite. Politicians, businessmen, society figures, old money families whose names appeared on buildings and streets throughout the city. They were gathered for a charity fundraiser, black tie event, $500 per plate. The money would go to building a new hospital wing. At least that's what the invitation said. Really, it was an opportunity for wealthy white people to see and be seen, to network, to remind each other of their status in the social hierarchy. And at the center of the room, holding court near the bar, was Preston Vanderburg III, 58 years old, real estate magnate. His family had owned property in Manhattan since the 1800s, buildings, land, entire blocks. He wore a tuxedo that cost more than most people earned in a year, diamond cufflinks, a Patek Philippe watch, hair perfectly styled, manicured nails. Preston Vanderburg represented everything old money stood for: tradition, refinement, and an unshakable belief that some people were simply born better than others. He was standing with a small group of men, all of them wealthy, all of them white, all of them laughing at something Preston had just said. That's when Bumpy Johnson walked into the ballroom. He wasn't supposed to be there. The invitation list had been carefully curated. Only certain people, only the right kind of people. But Bumpy had received an invitation anyway, from the hospital board chairman, who happened to owe Bumpy several favors and knew that refusing him would be unwise. Bumpy walked through the ballroom in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, black, simple, elegant, no flashy jewelry except for one item, a gold ring on his right hand, large, ornate, with a black onyx stone in the center. He'd worn it for 20 years, a gift from Stephanie St. Clair when she'd retired and passed her operation to him, the ring that symbolized his position as Harlem's undisputed leader. Bumpy moved through the crowd. Some people recognized him, whispered to each other. Most just saw a well-dressed black man and assumed he was staff. He walked directly toward Preston Vanderburg. The group of men noticed him approaching. Their conversation died. Preston turned, looked at Bumpy. His expression was carefully neutral. "Can I help you?" Preston asked. His tone suggested he was already annoyed. "Preston Vanderburg," Bumpy said. "I've heard a lot about you." "Have you?" Not a question, a dismissal. "I'm Bumpy Johnson. I run operations in Harlem. I was told you're one of the largest property owners in Upper Manhattan." Bumpy extended his hand. Preston looked at Bumpy's hand, then at Bumpy's face, and didn't move. "I don't shake hands with people I don't know," Preston said. "We're being introduced now," Bumpy replied calmly, "and I've decided I don't need to know you." The other men in the group shifted uncomfortably. This was getting awkward.
"Mr. Vanderburg," one of them said quietly, "perhaps you should—" "Perhaps I should what?" Preston turned to face the man. "Shake hands with someone who wasn't invited? Someone who clearly doesn't belong here?" He looked back at Bumpy. His expression was cold. "I know who you are, Mr. Johnson. You're a criminal, a gangster. You run illegal operations in Harlem. And the fact that you somehow obtained an invitation to this event doesn't change what you are." Preston took a step closer. "I don't associate with criminals. I don't acknowledge them, and I certainly don't shake their hands. Especially not—" He paused, let the sentence hang. Everyone knew what he was about to say. "Especially not black criminals." Bumpy's expression didn't change. "I see. I hope you do. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual guests to speak with." Preston turned his back on Bumpy, returned to his conversation with the other men. Bumpy stood there for a moment, looking at Preston's back. Then he walked away. But he didn't leave the ballroom. Bumpy walked to a quiet corner of the ballroom, stood near a marble column where he could watch the room. Preston Vanderberg's words echoed in his mind. I don't shake hands with criminals, especially not. Bumpy had heard variations of that sentiment his entire life. He remembered being 19 years old, fresh out of prison, trying to find legitimate work in Harlem. He'd applied for a job at a warehouse. The manager had looked at his application, seen the conviction, seen his face. We don't hire criminals here, and we especially don't hire your kind. Your kind. As if being black and having a record made him something less than human. Bumpy had learned early that in America there were different rules for different people. A white man with money could commit crimes and be called eccentric. A black man with a criminal record could turn his life around completely and still be treated as irredeemable. He'd built an empire in Harlem despite those rules, built it by understanding that respect couldn't be requested. It had to be demanded, sometimes with words, sometimes with actions, sometimes with force. Preston Vanderberg came from a world where respect was inherited, passed down through generations like property and wealth, where your last name mattered more than your character. Bumpy came from a world where respect was earned, proven, taken when it wasn't given freely. And tonight, Preston Vanderberg had made a critical mistake. He'd disrespected Bumpy Johnson in public, in front of witnesses. That couldn't stand. Bumpy watched Preston for the next hour, watched him move through the room, shaking hands with senators and judges, laughing with businessmen, playing the role of gracious host, even though this wasn't his event. Preston commanded the room. Everyone wanted to speak with him, to be seen with him, to earn his approval. At 10:15 p.m., Preston walked toward the men's room. Alone. Bumpy followed. The bathroom was ornate, marble floors, gold fixtures, more expensive than most people's homes. Preston was washing his hands when Bumpy walked in. He saw Bumpy in the mirror. His jaw tightened. Are you following me? We need to talk, Bumpy said quietly. We have nothing to discuss. Preston dried his hands, turned to leave. Bumpy stepped in front of the door, blocked his path. Move, Preston said. His voice was sharp now, commanding. You disrespected me out there, refused to shake my hand, made it clear you think I'm beneath you. You are beneath me. Now move before I call security. Call them. But first, you're going to apologize. Preston laughed, actually laughed. Apologize? To you? You must be insane. No, I'm practical. You insulted me in front of 200 people. Now you're going to make it right. I'm not doing anything except leaving this bathroom, and if you don't move, I'll have you arrested for assault. For standing in front of a door? For threatening me. I haven't threatened you. Yet. Preston's face went red. Are you threatening me now? Do you have any idea who I am? What I can do to you? I know exactly who you are. Preston Vanderberg III, born into money, never worked a day in your life. You think your last name makes you royalty. Bumpy took a step closer. But here's what you don't understand. Your money, your property, your family name, none of that means anything in Harlem. In my world, respect isn't inherited, it's earned. And you just disrespected the king of Harlem. King? Sneered Preston. You're a street thug with delusions of grandeur. Maybe, but this street thug controls more of Manhattan than you realize. Your properties in Upper Manhattan, the ones you rent to black families at inflated prices, those families work for me. Those buildings could have problems, plumbing issues, electrical fires, tenant strikes. Preston's expression shifted slightly. Are you threatening my business? I'm explaining reality. You wanted to treat me like I'm beneath you. Fine, but actions have consequences, even for people named Vanderberg. Preston was quiet for a moment, calculating. What do you want? An apology. Public. in front of the same people who saw you disrespect me. Never. Then we have a problem. Bumpy pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke quietly for 30 seconds, hung up. What was that? Preston asked. I just made 3 calls. By tomorrow morning, every tenant in your Harlem properties will receive notice of a rent strike. Every business you rent to will receive notice of building code violations, and every politician you've paid off will receive an anonymous package containing evidence of those payments. Preston's face went pale. You're bluffing. Try me. They stared at each other for a long moment. Preston's mind was racing. He could call security, have Bumpy removed, but that wouldn't stop the rent strikes, the violations, the evidence packages. This black gangster had real power, real connections, real leverage. Preston had underestimated him. Fine, Preston said through gritted teeth. I'll apologize, publicly, in front of everyone. No, Bumpy said. You'll do more than that. He held up his right hand, showed Preston the ring, the gold, the black onyx. You wanted to treat me like I was beneath you, like you're royalty and I'm a peasant. So now you're going to acknowledge what I really am. What are you talking about? You're going to kneel. You're going to kiss my ring, like subjects kiss a king's ring, in front of everyone in that ballroom. Preston's eyes went wide. Absolutely not. I will not. Yes, you will. Because if you don't, I'll destroy everything you've built. Your properties, your reputation, your family name. I'll make sure everyone knows that Preston Vanderburg III is a racist who extorts poor black families while pretending to be a philanthropist. You have no proof of... I have receipts, tax documents, testimonies from dozens of tenants you've exploited. I've been collecting evidence on you for 6 months. Preston stared at him. Why? Because men like you think you're untouchable, think your money and your name protect you from consequences. I wanted to be ready for the day when you revealed your true character. Bumpy smiled slightly. You did that tonight, when you refused to shake my hand, when you made it clear you think I'm less than human because of my skin color. He lowered his hand. The ring caught the bathroom's light. So now you have a choice. Kiss the ring, show everyone that even the mighty Vanderburgs can be humbled, or refuse and watch me dismantle your empire piece by piece. Preston's hands were shaking with rage, with humiliation, with the realization that he'd been outmaneuvered. This is extortion. No, this is justice. You've been extorting Harlem families for years, charging them double what white tenants pay, refusing to make repairs, threatening eviction when they complain. I'm just evening the scales. Preston was silent for a long time. How do I know you'll stop if I do this? You have my word. You kiss the ring, you apologize publicly, and I'll leave your properties alone. But if you ever disrespect me again, if you ever treat another black person the way you treated me tonight, the deal's off. Preston closed his eyes, took a deep breath. When he opened them, his expression was defeated. Fine. 10:47 p.m. Preston Vanderburg walked back into the ballroom. Bumpy followed 30 seconds later. The crowd was thinning. Some people had left. Maybe 200 remained. Preston walked to the center of the room, near the bar where he'd been standing earlier. He cleared his throat, spoke loudly enough for the nearby crowd to hear. "Excuse me, may I have everyone's attention, please?" The conversations died down. People turned to look. Preston's face was pale, his jaw tight. Earlier this evening, I was introduced to Mr. Bumpy Johnson. He extended his hand in greeting. I refused to shake it. I was rude, dismissive, and I want to publicly apologize for my behavior. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, people exchanging confused looks. Bumpy walked forward, stood next to Preston. "Mr. Johnson," Preston continued. His voice was strained. "I apologize for disrespecting you, for treating you as if you were beneath me. You are a respected member of the Harlem community, and I should have shown you the courtesy I would show any other guest." He paused. Then, slowly, Preston Vanderburg III, heir to one of New York's oldest fortunes, lowered himself to one knee. The crowd gasped. Preston reached for Bumpy's hand, the one with the ring. He lifted it, brought it close to his face, and kissed the ring. The ballroom was absolutely silent. 200 witnesses watching a moment that would become legendary. Preston Vanderburg, old money, high society, on his knees, kissing the ring of a black gangster from Harlem. Preston stood up. His face was red, his eyes filled with barely contained rage, but he'd done it. Bumpy looked at him for a moment, then nodded once. Apology accepted. He turned and walked out of the ballroom. The crowd erupted in whispers, everyone talking at once, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Preston stood there, humiliated, destroyed. His carefully cultivated image shattered in front of the people whose opinions mattered most to him. The next day, the story spread through New York like wildfire. Preston Vanderburg knelt in front of Bumpy Johnson, kissed his ring in front of 200 witnesses. The high society crowd was scandalized. Some said Preston had been coerced. Others said he'd finally been held accountable for his racism. Preston's business associates started distancing themselves. Nobody wanted to be connected to the man who'd been humbled so publicly. Within a week, Preston sold 3 of his Harlem properties below market value to avoid the promised strikes and violations. Within a month, he'd resigned from 2 charity boards, his reputation too damaged to be useful. Within a year, the Vanderburg name had lost much of its influence. Preston became a cautionary tale, the man who'd underestimated Bumpy Johnson. 3 days after the Waldorf incident, Bumpy sat in his office above Small's Paradise. Illinois Gordon was with him. They were discussing business, numbers from the policy banks, updates on territory. But Illinois could tell Bumpy's mind was elsewhere. "You thinking about Vanderburg?" Illinois asked. "Yes." "You regret what you did, making him kiss your ring in front of all those people?" Bumpy was quiet for a moment. "No, but I've been thinking about why I did it." "He disrespected you. You made him pay."
It's more than that. Bumpy leaned back in his chair. Men like Preston Vanderburg, they've never had to face consequences. Their whole lives, they've been told they're special, superior, that their last name and their money make them better than everyone else. And you showed him different. I showed him what it feels like to be powerless, to have someone look down on you, to be treated as less than human. Bumpy stood, walked to the window, looked out at Harlem. Every black person in this city has felt what I felt that night. Someone refusing to shake their hand, someone treating them like they're invisible or dangerous or inferior. We live with that disrespect every single day. So making Vanderburg kneel, making him kiss your ring, was teaching him empathy, making him understand, just for one moment, what it's like to be judged solely by the color of your skin, what it's like to be forced to humiliate yourself just to survive. Illinois nodded slowly. You think he learned the lesson? I don't know. Some men never learn. They go their whole lives believing they're entitled to treat others however they want. But maybe, just maybe, Preston Vanderburg will think twice before disrespecting someone again. And if he doesn't, then the next time I won't be as gentle. 6 months later, November 1956. Preston Vanderburg sat in his Park Avenue penthouse. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. His wife had left him 3 months ago, moved back to her family's estate in Connecticut. She couldn't handle the scandal, couldn't face her society friends after what happened at the Waldorf. His business had taken serious hits. The Harlem properties he'd sold at a loss.
the political connections that had dried up when those evidence packages mysteriously never materialized, but the threat remained. Preston poured himself a scotch, his third of the evening. He thought about that night, about Bumpy Johnson standing in the bathroom, making threats that turned out to be real. Preston had called Bumpy's bluff initially, refused the first demand to apologize. Then the rent strike started. 3 buildings, all his Harlem properties, coordinated, organized. Then the building inspectors showed up, found violations Preston had been paying to keep hidden for years. Then the first envelope arrived at a city councilman's office, containing proof of illegal payments. Preston had realized then that Bumpy wasn't bluffing, wasn't overreaching. The man had real power, real organization, real leverage. So Preston had made the calculation: humiliate himself once in public or lose everything slowly, piece by piece. He'd chosen the former, and he'd regretted it every day since. Not because he'd apologized, but because he'd been forced to recognize something he'd spent his entire life denying: that a black man from Harlem could have more real power than a white man from Park Avenue, that money and lineage weren't absolute protections, that treating people as inferior came with consequences.
Preston finished his scotch, poured another. He thought about calling Bumpy, about trying to rebuild bridges, about asking for the evidence packages to be destroyed. But he knew it was pointless. The damage was done. Preston Vanderburg III had been a king in his own world until he met the real king of Harlem and learned that some thrones can't be inherited. They have to be earned. When Bumpy Johnson died in July 1968, Preston Vanderburg read about it in the newspaper. He was 70 years old now, retired, living quietly in Connecticut. He'd never returned to his former position in New York society. The Waldorf incident had permanently marked him. But reading about Bumpy's death, Preston felt something unexpected. Not relief, not satisfaction. Respect. Because Bumpy had taught him a lesson that night in 1956, that true power isn't about money or lineage or skin color. It's about earning the respect of your community, about standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves, about making sure that everyone, regardless of race or class, is treated with dignity. Preston had spent 60 years believing he was better than other people. Bumpy Johnson had spent 60 seconds showing him he was wrong. And Preston carried that lesson for the rest of his life.